Welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Seema Iyer, filling in for Vinnie Politan. And you know what the best part of filling in for Vinnie? I get a think tank. That's right, my think tank is here. So we've got criminal defense attorney Barbara Moon, who is flanked by two former used car salesmen, Michael Bixon, criminal defense attorney, and David Schnipper, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Okay, so fun fact for the audience is that the two of you went to law school together.
We did.
We did.
This is great.
Lucky,
this is great.
Lucky him.
Okay,
Yeah.
so who did better exam time?
I can't.
Exam time, obviously he did.
I was going to say, I couldn't imagine anyone doing much worse than me, so it had to be him.
I was at the bar the whole time.
Okay, okay, the bar. Oh, that's good. I like that. Okay, a little legal humor to begin the day. Okay, so thank you all for being here. In all seriousness, this case, horrific, gruesome. These two young kids just brutally murdered. Starting off with how the prosecution did this morning. I'm going to ask you, Michael, even though you're the former prosecutor, I want you to, lay into it. What did you think the prosecution did well or not so well?
It's going to be a tough case for them, honestly. As horrific as these facts are, they don't really have much to stand on. I mean, the witness that they're going to be relying on doesn't really have much credibility, and the fact that so much time has gone by only hurts their case more and more, right? I think from the get-go, the defense is going to have a much better case, and obviously not even withstanding the legal standards here, right? So overall, yeah, I mean, not only do they have a much tougher time presenting this case, but even without that, I thought that the defense did a much better job this morning in actually presenting it.
David, my concern was because it's the same prosecutor, maybe she's almost lost steam at this point. It's been 12 years. How did she come across to you?
Well, I mean, I think it gives above her. I mean, the politics with this case with now coming 12 years later. And what we have to understand is that Eric Boyd is going to be released from federal prison in less than 3.5 years. And that is a big reason why now he is being on trial on 36 counts. Now, the prosecutor that's on this case and knows this case inside and out. And let's not forget the judge that was on this case originally was disbarred for a whole slew of reasons, including he had a pill problem and God knows what. So not only was she involved with the cases before, but some of the retrials as well. So I think her being there is actually good for the state.
So this is Judge Baumgartner, right?
Judge Baumgartner is the one who, in 2011, he was...
it was a drug scandal,
yes.
And he had a history of drug addiction to prescription pills and regularly took the bench while he was high. He would be reprimanded and removed years after, but these high-profile cases, such as this case, ended up coming under review, and then all four defendants, so not Eric Boyd. Eric Boyd only had a federal case, but the four defendants, they ended up getting new trials and similar sentences. But Barbara, is this just some scandalous sideshow? Do we really care about Judge Baumgartner in this trial? Should the jurors care?
No, they shouldn't care about that because the way the case was presented before, they obviously had enough evidence there to convict the four, and that's just a sideshow. They're just diverting the attention by bringing in all the issues with the judge. And after going over the material, they were saying, gosh, this case has so many twists and turns, so many crazy things that happened, not only the facts here, but also the issues with the judge, which gave the defendants an opportunity to have another trial, which still didn't, the results were not different.
And still, Eric Boyd not being brought to justice till now.
Right, and that's what's too is so bizarre that 12 years later that they would bring him to, why didn't they do this, 12 years ago? Why didn't they try to get someone to flip on him then? And clearly his whole reason is get out of jail free card.
Or early card, right?
Yeah, early card.
Well, we've seen the community out there clamoring to prosecute this guy, right? And at a certain point, it doesn't really matter what he did and what he didn't do. They want to see this guy prosecuted. I don't even think they really care about what he's done at this point. I mean, look, there's a reason he wasn't tried the first time around. Honestly, because he didn't have anything to do with it other than what he was charged federally with, and he's done his time on that, Nothing new has really come forward other than now one of the guys coming forward and flipping, and they do have another witness saying that there was an additional person in the car,
right?
But not necessarily identifying
him.
Yeah,
no, you're exactly right. I mean, they're just saying like four black men through tinted windows.
Right.
Because, and honestly, Barbara Moon, who's a Caucasian woman, could look like a black man through a tinted window.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and that's not nothing. But George Thomas, so he's the star
Yes.
witness. We are expecting him to testify tomorrow morning. Trial starts Tennessee versus Boyd, 9:30 a.m. And yes, star witness is expected to testify tomorrow. So he actually went to Kentucky police, and I think he mentioned Eric Boyd, or he made some statement connecting Eric Boyd to this case. But then, and again, I'm just summarizing, but basically he was like, oh yeah, I don't feel like testifying. Well, excuse me, that's not how the justice system works, hello? Because there's something called a material witness order, and judges will take you and stick you in a jail on the side of the courthouse and then make you testify. So they didn't do that then.
No, and look, again, if he actually had something that important to say, and if it was actually true, then it should have happened already.
Because he would have tried to get a deal then, right, Schnipper?
Yes, but we don't know if he attempted to get a deal then and maybe it wasn't offered. Again, this case is as egregious as they come. It's heinous, it's cruel, it's deplorable. And now look, as we saw with the defense, is he's getting, I think, 76 years chopped off of his full sentence. I think it was 127 years now to whatever.
Right.
So I mean that's a lot of ammunition to now come and testify.
But despite how deplorable the facts are, it doesn't mean Eric Boyd was involved.
Exactly. But that's what their focus is going to be, and I think that's what the study is doing, because when you hear these facts, you get so caught up in the facts being so egregious and horrific that it's kind of like you're not focusing on what you should, which is, has the state proven that Eric Boyd had committed these offenses?
And it doesn't seem like they have much going forward now except for George Thomas.
Right.
Correct. Unless there's some sort of, secret curveball that they have that we don't know about.
There was some information about a girlfriend that he had at the time, Eric Boyd's girlfriend. That, again, this is a speculation because, see, we're at a, what's the word? I'm hamstrung.
Deficiency.
Yeah, that's a word. Those are two. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
take it.
Yeah, I'll take it. Because the prosecution didn't say it on their opening statement, right? So if the prosecution said in their opening statement, this person's going to testify, this person's
Right.
going to testify, then we would know what to expect. So at this point, we don't know anyone that would implicate Eric Boyd but for George Thomas.
And why
That's it.
now? And why now? Why 12 years? Why not 11 years? Why not 10
Well,
years?
I think we all know why.
Like
It's
today?
because his federal sentence is coming up, and the lynch mob is out for blood. It's that simple.
And look, I grew up near Gainesville, Florida, which is a sleepy, very southern college football town. That's what Knoxville, Tennessee is. It's a very, very close-knit southern college football town. This case and these murders rocked the conscience of this community to such a core that they're still trying to get over it. And the pressure that the upper brass and legislatures and stuff to have this now come is one of the reasons why this is happening.
Okay, think tank, stay with me. We'll be back after a quick commercial. And now it's been more than 12 years since the murders of Channing Christian and Christopher Newsom. Does that help the prosecution or the defense? That's our 13th juror question. Log on to our Court TV Facebook page and vote now.
They came through, and I basically told them, yeah, they mean mugged me. And I kind of mean mugged them back, to say, they were looking at me as if like, why are you here? And I gave them a look like, why are you here? I work here. I guess it was just a male thing, I don't know, it's hard to explain. If anybody's been in that situation when men are looking at each other, it's kind of like, you don't back down. And that's what I felt was going on.
That was Xavier Jenkins. At the time of the murders, he worked as a trash collector, and he identified the car with a red stripe that Eric Boyd is accused of borrowing during the carjacking. Let's listen to a little more from Mr. Jenkins.
I couldn't see any faces, so I couldn't tell you who was in the vehicle, but I could definitely tell how many. It was 4 people in the vehicle. The driver, to me, seemed to be the tallest. He had on a bomber coat with a fur collar, if you will, almost like your bubble jacket, I guess, kind of deal. because you could see in that silhouette, I could see the fur around the collar. And the passenger, the far back passenger on the right side, he was slumped down in the seat like he was trying to hide. I don't know why that is, but yeah.
So how many people total did you see in the movie?
Total 4.
Can you tell what sex they were?
To me, they were all men, and from their demeanor, I thought they were black men.
The think tank is still with me despite my incessant making fun of them. Okay, so do you think Xavier Jenkins, especially when earlier we're talking about this whole 12-year gap, this delay in justice perhaps, but they've held on to Xavier Jenkins. So, when you have this conversation about George Thomas and the fact that George Thomas hasn't come forward till now, but this guy, if you want to keep a witness around and if you want someone to testify for you decades later, you can. But Xavier Jenkins, he has no, dog in the fight?
Right.
Not the best witness either. I mean,
really?
Oh, absolutely
one
not.
of our correspondents found him to be very confident. Like he comes across as confident. What did you find that was
he's very
deficient?
confident in his vagueness.
It's
In all honesty,
terrible.
it's true though. I mean, because look, what did he actually testify about? He saw some people in a car. To him, maybe they were black.
Yeah.
They had a male sort of, assertion about what was. I mean, like he doesn't identify him. I mean, he just says look, he identifies the car, and that's good. But aside from that, nothing much.
It's like 4 people. It could be like 4 silhouettes.
And that's what really bothers me is that they're presenting him as such an important
Like
witness.
an eyewitness.
Right.
Yeah, and he
But
wasn't.
it's just 4 people in a vehicle.
Like a silhouette.
And it's not like, are these the only humans that existed?
Right.
Were the 3 male defendants that have been convicted plus Eric Boyd?
Right.
Did the defense do a good enough job at chipping away at Mr. Jenkins' credibility?
Absolutely, and to segue what Michael said is right. All we know is that there's 4 maybe African Americans in a car, and that's it. Now, the witness has been consistent from day one, and what the state is hoping for is that look, everybody knows that Boyd was involved. We know as an accessory. Tried to help Slim Davidson after the fact, and he's been convicted. So the state's hoping for, well, if not Boyd, then who could it be? So it must be Boyd. But then again, he can't say anything but for the fact, well, I think there were 4 black people in a car.
And no one has put him there yet, for sure. No one has put Boyd there.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Right.
But, I mean, that could happen tomorrow, surely. But as of right now, and why hasn't anyone put him there before now?
Exactly, because anybody who comes forward now is just going to be...
It's not going to be credible.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, before, we were also talking about the emotional aspect of this trial, everything about it, from the victims' ages to the injuries and how they were murdered. There were 2 really compelling witnesses of the day, and that were the friends of the young people that died. So the first, let's play a little testimony from Josh Anderson, who was Christopher Newsom's best friend. Let's take a look.
I'm sorry. We hear of a body found by the railroad tracks. But at that point didn't know, wouldn't have thought it would have been Newsom at that point.
Why not?
You just wouldn't have thought that it would have been him,
Were you familiar with that location?
Yes.
Had you ever been there with Bixon?
No.
Okay, before I actually get your reaction, I want to play for you also now Kara Sowards, and this was the best friend of Channon Christian, and she also gave very stirring testimony from earlier today about her best friend. Take a look.
remember who got the phone call, but someone got it and said that Chris was dead.
Well, y'all knew that.
It was sort of chaotic, a lot of crying and screaming. Shannon's parents immediately walked back down the stairs, and Dina screams out, "I'm going to find my child." And then we all kind of get in the car and just go back to that area to see if we can find her.
Barbara, as a defense attorney, how do you cross a witness like this?
That's tough. I mean, one thing you learn, like way back in law school, is that when someone's that emotional and it's a victim's family or it's an elderly person or a young child, you have to be very careful about that because the jurors will turn on you like this. And you've got a job to do, but it's a slippery slope when you've got a close friend of a victim who has been brutally murdered. I think on that one, you just got to be sympathetic to them and then say, I'm sorry about your loss.
Right. That's a good way to start.
And
That's
just start off
excellent,
there. I just want to let you know from the beginning, I'm just here doing my job. I'm very sorry about your loss. And you just get up and get out as quickly as possible because she hasn't seen anything. She doesn't know anything other than her friend was there, the friend left, she didn't see her again. So there's really nothing a defense attorney is going to gain from questioning her other than just very lightly, giving her the condolences and
perhaps maybe getting out some facts that you need.
Right.
Delicate.
Yeah.
I mean, Barbara couldn't have said it better. Be very, very cautious, delicate, sorry. I'm so sympathetic. So apologetic. So again, you don't want the jury to wait. This person's an a-hole.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if that happens,
Hey, Snipper,
it's
watch
over.
your language. Kids are watching. Okay, I'm just kidding. That was good. Nice way to catch it. But Bixon, when you're cross-examining witnesses like this, actually, let's shift to Josh Anderson. I mean, you guys know, for a guy to cry, I mean, I just think it's for the public in general, it's easier to watch a child or even a woman or a young person cry. But when you see a grown man cry, and it's been 12 years since he lost his best friend, how do you cross-examine him?
Well, I mean, the question is, do you even cross-examine? I mean, you don't have to.
Excellent.
And look, no one's questioning that this is a horrible, just disgusting crime. That much is clear as day, right? No one's going to question that. What do you have to gain by crossing, other than saying you're sorry? I mean, no one cares.
Well, no, but I'm saying unless there are facts that
That's
you
what
need
I'm
to
saying.
get out.
But
Okay.
in this case, those don't exist,
So-
right? We all acknowledge it's a terrible, horrible crime, but that goes towards nothing in determining whether or not Mr. Boyd had a part in this.
So strategically, you could actually just also look in front of the jury and be a human being. You could just get up and say, "I'm sorry for your loss," no questions.
Nothing further.
That's what
Because what else do you have to gain?
Right,
agree.
that's exactly what to show that your client feels, has soft feelings for that person too. To show that there's a soft side of you, because as criminal defense attorneys, we know when the other witnesses come up that we've got to be tough with, there's going to be a different side of us. So I think if you got up and just said, "I'm just so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that you have to be here under these circumstances," and sit down, that shows a soft side of you and your client as well.
Very well said, all three of you. Now, it has been more than 12 years since the murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Does that help the prosecution or the defense? That is our 13th juror question this evening, so please log on to our Court TV Facebook page and vote now before time is up.
What they did, it's unhuman.
Hard to even look at the facts in this case because it was such a gruesome killing.
Eric Boyd stands accused of murder, a double homicide committed 12 years ago.
We've been through all of that before.
After a public outcry, Boyd is now the last of 5 suspects to face trial for the kidnapping, torture, rape, and murder of a young Tennessee couple.
Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom, they were on their way to a date. This car pulls up, men jump out with guns, they are carjacked, tortured, and they're eventually murdered.
Why now? Why was Eric Boyd not tried earlier for the murder?
I see them every time I shut my eyes. It's just part of my life.
Good evening and welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Seema Iyer in for Vinnie Politan. Day one of Tennessee versus Boyd is in the books. We heard from the prosecution, we heard from the defense. They both gave opening statements, and then a slew of witnesses, 11 to be precise, presented by the prosecution. But there was one witness, and I can't recall. I just can't recall. Oh no, it's not me, it's her. So she couldn't recall. She couldn't recall over and over and over again. And this is what happens when you don't answer the phone when the prosecutors and the defense attorney call you. You just get on the stand and you keep saying, I don't recall, over and over and over again. Let's go back into court and take a look.
Do you recall being asked, you're going to have to tell me, I'm just trying to draw your attention back to the general weekend, which is the weekend roughly of January 6th through January 8th. January 6th would be a Friday. And you recall giving the answer, yes, somebody borrowed it.
I don't recall.
You don't recall that? Okay. Do you recall being asked the question, okay, who borrowed your car? You do not recall that question?
No.
You recall giving the answer, Eric Boyd? No. No? And do you recall being asked the question, your cousin, and you saying yes?
No.
Do you recall being asked the question, the defendant in the courtroom?
No.
And you giving the answer yes? Okay. And do you recall being asked the question, do you remember what day he borrowed the car, and your answer being either Thursday or Friday?
No, can't recall.
Can't recall, okay. Now, do you recall, I'm on page 100, I don't know. Do you recall being asked the question in a previous court proceeding, okay, and did you go inside to try and get the keys, or what did you do?
I have no clue.
No?
Okay.
Do you recall giving the answer, I went inside to get the keys?
I don't recall.
Now, so whenever you told us before that you went to Ridgebrook and you saw your car, did you have the keys with you, or did you have to go get the keys?
I really don't remember.
Okay, that's fair. Do you recall being asked the question, did you see Eric Boyd?
I don't remember, but if it's in there, I guess.
Okay, and you saying yes. And so you're not denying this, you're just saying as you sit here today, you don't recall what happened January 2007.
Correct.
Do you recall being asked the question, did he say anything to you? And your answer being yes, he said my car was broke down.
But it was always broke down, so if it's in there.
Okay. And do you recall you being asked what did you do, and you saying I went out there and tried to start my car up?
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. Jump ahead. Did you have to ride the bus over to Ridgebrook?
I really can't recall.
You can't recall? That's fair. Let's see here. Let me jump over. And do you recall being asked? So you were trying to get your belongings out, meaning your car, and you saying yes? And you being asked, and did you find some of your CDs? You saying yes. And then the question being, do you recall being asked this, did you find anything else in the car? And do you recall answering yes, a sandwich bag of bullets? Do you recall giving that answer?
No.
Question being a clear sandwich bag, and you saying yes,
I don't recall.
of bullets? And do you recall giving a description of the bullets?
No.
Saying about like your finger? The length of your pinky finger?
I can't recall.
Can't recall that? Okay. You're not saying it didn't happen, you're just saying you don't recall.
I just don't remember anything.
Okay.
Even after it happened, probably.
Right. All right, let's go to a court proceeding in 2010. Do you recall being sworn in and being asked the question in May 2010? that the first weekend in January 2007, did you loan that white Sunbird to somebody? Do you recall being asked that question in 2010?
I don't recall.
You recall being given the answer yes?
I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked the question, and who was that?
I don't recall.
Don't recall. And you recall giving the answer, my cousin Eric Boyd.
I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked the question, okay, did you look in the car? Did you find anything in the car?
I don't recall.
And do you recall giving the answer, yes, some bullets?
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you recall being asked, can you describe those bullets? And you giving the answer, they were small bullets.
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you recall being asked the question, and were they loose bullets or were they in something? And you giving the answer, they was in a sandwich bag.
I don't recall.
Recall it? Okay. Do you recall a court proceeding in 2009? Being asked a question as a result of the conversation, what did you do then? And, well, let me back up. You, let me back up. You recall being asked now, did you have a cousin or do you still have a cousin by the name of Eric Boyd? You saying yes, which you recall that one. That is true.
I was about to say it could have.
Do you recall being asked the question, did you have a conversation with him the first weekend of January 2007, and you give him the answer, I believe so?
I don't recall.
Don't recall. And you recall being asked the question, as a result of the conversation, what did you then do? And you give him the answer, let him borrow my car.
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall being asked the question, tell us what, if anything, you found in the car, and you give him the answer, small bullets on the passenger side seat?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, do you know approximately how many bullets you found, and given the answer, no, it was in a sandwich bag?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, a sandwich bag, and you given the answer, yes, probably I'd say more than 10.
I don't recall.
Okay.
Okay, this is getting painful to watch. It's getting painful to watch. My think tank is losing it as well. They're sitting here, they're losing it. Okay, so Schnipper, I'm gonna go to you first because you're the former prosecutor,
Yes.
and I just want our viewers to understand kind of like the propriety of how we are supposed to prep witnesses, especially as prosecutors. Now, this witness, Ms. Mathis, is the cousin of Eric Boyd,
Right.
and she did not return phone calls from the prosecution or the defense when they tried to reach out to her and presumably prepare her. Now, let's just say she did.
Right.
Are you allowed to show her that previous transcript?
Yes, I mean the previous transcript that they're showing and reading in court is called, the correct terminology, we're refreshing the recollection.
No, but I'm saying before we get to refreshing the recollection,
Yes,
in your office,
absolutely.
like she calls you back, she goes into your
Absolutely.
office, and you can go through the transcript, right?
100%.
So we all agree, that's nothing wrong with
no
that.
problem.
Preparation.
She obviously was involved in the former trials, plural, of the four. So she was cross-examined probably multiple times and under oath. And so what they're going over in court is her answers that were under oath over a decade ago. Now, it's obvious that she doesn't want to cooperate. She,
Yeah, you think?
I mean,
We got Matlock over here.
I'm not the
Okay.
sharpest knife in the drawer, but maybe it's my day. I don't know. So she's been subpoenaed by the state to testify. Now, a reasonable person can say, hey, this happened over a decade ago. Maybe she doesn't remember, yada, yada, yada. But that's what the state is going over is what she
I
was
can't
cross-examined.
believe he just yada, yada on Vinnie Politan's show.
Yeah, right.
Okay, this is what happened when SEMA fills in. But no, you make a really good point about the subpoena, because the subpoena, it comes to your door, so you know you have to call someone back.
Right.
So Barbara, doesn't the subpoena in and of itself put the fear in you as a witness that I'm going to have to testify, so I better call these people back?
Right, and most people would. Some would just say, I'm out of here. But in this case, she's trying to play the, well, I don't know card. We're hoping that they will not insist on her coming. But the reason the state wants her to come, even though she's doing this, I don't know, because the state gets to refresh her recollection by having that transcript and then getting testimony in that way.
But they didn't get anything in.
Well, but she's reading and saying, she's reading the transcript and saying, you said this, didn't you? I don't know, but you said this, but you said this. And then it's your signature at the end. When they finish with her, they'll say, this is your signature, right? Now, I didn't care for the way the state did this, but if she wanted to get that evidence in that this, in fact, this witness had testified to these facts before, it was the only way she was going to get it in without her saying, I don't know, because she could refresh it with her prior testimony that she testified to in a previous case. And the importance there was that car, she was tying it into the car with the bullets in the car, and we don't know the exact time that Eric Boyd was there other than after the fact.
And therein lies the dilemma, right?
There's the dilemma.
Bixon, if you had this information of this car that was borrowed by Eric Boyd back in 2007 or 2008, again, another question as to why this wasn't used to prosecute him.
It should have been. I mean, look, at a certain point, when you're talking about this, she's a hostile witness, and she's not being treated like one. She's gently coaxing her along and sort of maybe asking her questions, but she's not grilling her about it. She should be. She's like, well, did you testify a different way about this before? Didn't you I mean, why is she not getting into her about this line? Right. I mean, it's insane.
Okay, Barbara Moon, you agree? Like,
yes,
how do you, but I'm saying, like,
absolutely.
she's being so calm. How do you make her a hostile witness?
Yeah, that's not my style.
Okay, so what would you do?
Yeah, how I would be is with the transcript saying, you said this at this date, you said this at this time, and I wouldn't give her a chance to say, you don't recall, recall. And just go down you said this and have the transcript and just read it off like that. And you said it this time, and you said it this time, but today you can't remember. You said this, and just really in that tone where it makes her look ridiculous. And then the stronger I think that the attorney would be, the state prosecutor would be, is that I'm trying to think of a good word, the more ridiculous it makes her, and that's a kind word.
And I feel bad.
I don't feel bad for her. You feel bad for her? You feel bad for the witness? Are you kidding me?
I mean, here's the thing. I don't think there's a harm in treating her as a hostile witness because she's a fact witness. She's not a sympathetic character that we have to worry about. But what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think it's important to get out there is a prejudice and there is a motive for her not to remember all of a sudden, right? She's out there to save her cousin.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Yeah, but you know what? She testified before, and she had to invoke his name in borrowing the car, so she wasn't out to protect him then, Schnipper.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think it really matters that much how she's acting because she's been cross-examined, and I think there's 4 other trials. The federal trial, including Eric Boyd's federal trial.
Right.
So there's, in essence, I think there's 5 other trials that she was potentially has been cross-examined and answering these same questions.
Last question, should the judge have intervened?
I don't know that the judge, it's just her way of refreshing.
Okay.
No, what's the judge going to do? Say, answer the question? I mean, so the
Yeah.
judge can't make her answer the question.
Answer the
You can't force her to remember.
You can't fake, you can't.
Okay.
But the way you make her look ridiculous is the way that, like you said, you treat her like a hostile witness, meaning that we have to act hostile. Like, really? You don't remember this? You said this,
All right,
you said
you
this.
three are getting hostile. Hang on. Hold on a second. Give me a second. Folks, it's been more than 12 years since the murders of Channing Christian and Christopher Newsom. Does that help the prosecution or does it help the defense? That's our 13th juror question this evening. So log on to our Court TV Facebook page and vote right now. Welcome back to Closing Arguments. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the neighbors' testimony. This is Sandra Keeling Bible. She testified that she actually saw this is Channing Christian's SUV parked outside her home, and that was at the location of where the victims were terrorized.
Ma'am, if I could direct your attention back to January 2007, where were you living?
1121 Goddard Avenue.
And how long had you lived there?
About 6 months.
About 6 months?
Since July.
Since July? Where was that in relationship with Chipman Street?
It was on the corner of Goddard and Chipman.
If I can direct your attention back to Monday morning at about 1:45 a.m., do you recall someone knocking at your door?
Yes, ma'am. I was woke up by the police.
And was your attention directed to a location?
Yes, there was a car parked in front of the house at the stop sign.
And what type of car was it?
A silver 4Runner, I believe.
Now, were you asked about whether or not you had seen the car earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
Had you seen the car earlier?
No.
Had you been outside earlier?
I'd been on the porch about midnight.
About midnight, was the car there?
No.
Direct your attention to Exhibit 27. You recognize Exhibit 27?
Yes, ma'am.
What is Exhibit?
I'm sorry.
What is Exhibit 27?
That's the corner where I lived, if you're looking across the street.
And so this is Glider here, and this is, and that's Chittenden Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 28. What are we looking at here?
That's the stop sign in front of the house. That's where the car was parked.
And is that the car we see in the top?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to exhibit 27 and 28 in this evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. That will be received.
Now, if I could look in here on Exhibit 427. If you could take a look here, do you recognize a Chipman and Glider on this diagram?
Yes.
On this aerial view? Do you see on this aerial view where your house is, or house was?
Right here.
Can you, using that red marker, can you use an X to mark where your house was? And on this aerial map, do you see where the 4Runner was at 1:45 when the police knocked on your door? That's located here in Knox County.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what's.
Cross-examination. Miss Bible, when you saw this car parked in front of your house, you didn't see anybody around the vehicle as far as, you didn't see the vehicle get dropped off, is the point.
No, sir.
And so you certainly didn't see Eric Boyd there
No, sir.
or anybody else when the
No,
car,
sir.
you were in your house sleeping.
Yes, sir.
Hard to cover up a crime when you keep the victim's car in front of the location of the crime. Let's talk about it with a think tank. Okay, so Schnipper, you were saying that they did not do a good job of covering up their actions.
I mean, not do a good job.
And they got caught in 5 seconds.
They couldn't have done a worse job. I mean, first of all, you know, the neighborhood, the seedy neighborhood they were at, there was a car there that stuck out like a vehicle, a nice SUV that stuck out like a sore thumb. Now, you could say, well, they poured gas. So heinous to talk about.
Yeah,
this.
I know. I mean, but and again, we should actually just warn our viewers.
Yeah.
We are going to engage in maybe some graphic conversation here.
They poured gasoline on Christopher Newsom and lit him on fire after they shot him, execution style, on
3
the
times.
train.
Yes.
They just left his body there.
But I think that they thought the body would
It's going to be burned.
And then Shannon Christian, they poured bleach down her throat when she was unfortunately and again disturbingly raped in every which way.
She was raped vaginally, orally, and anally.
Yes.
And even though perhaps the pouring of the bleach down the throat they thought was going to destroy the DNA belonging to Davidson and Cobbins was found in different crevices of her body.
Right, and so I look at that as they didn't even try to hide the bodies or get rid of the bodies. Obviously, you know what started this to Slim Davidson was a fingerprint of his in the vehicle.
That's
so,
right.
you know, they didn't even try to get rid of the vehicle. So to me, it was almost like, did they just want to get caught? I don't know. It's unbelievable to me that how
The 3 of you have like billions of years of criminal defense experience. Or actually, the 4 of us together, right? So, what do you think? Do you think just criminals are just stupid? But and I said in the commercial, like in the defense of the criminals, in 2007, all of us knew so much less about DNA than we know now.
Right, and for the fact that they would think that, okay, we're going to pour bleach down her throat and therefore get rid of the DNA, when there's obviously other crevices that their DNA is in, that they didn't pour the bleach, they're thinking about just one particular area. And the DNA at that time obviously was not as prevalent as it is now in cases. who knows what they were thinking? I mean, this is so heinous that I think they were just reacting and just doing what they were doing and not really caring about covering up anything else. Maybe they thought they were just smarter than everyone else, or nobody would be looking for these victims as quickly as they were, and especially in that area. And I think, like you said, I think that they thought by burning his body on the tracks that maybe if the train came, it would be burned to such a degree that you wouldn't be able to recognize it as a body, and that maybe the train would go over it and even further destroy any evidence of
I think it's as simple as the level of maliciousness and cruelty far outweighed the level of intelligence involved in this crime. It's as simple as that. They just didn't think it through enough.
I also think, okay, so they say Slim Davidson was the ringleader. So perhaps the others involved were just so scared of him. They just went along with it.
Yeah, but I mean, the level of, I guess the level of intelligence displayed in this crime, I mean, look, it is horrible that as the whole thing is, it wasn't, you never want to say it wasn't done smart, but you know, they just left so much evidence behind, and when you look at it, and that's why I say just the level of cruelty so far, outweighs the level of intelligence that you see in something like this, because there really wasn't any displayed.
Right, and before we adjourn for the evening, we are going to have to talk about whether this should have been charged as a hate crime. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Okay, it's been more than 12 years since the murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Does that help the prosecution or the defense? That is our 13th juror question this evening, so log on to our Court TV Facebook page and vote now.
So tell us what happened, Grant. Is that how you left your family?
No, I didn't do any of this.
This is a twisted case of murder, money, and porn.
The rules are simple.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
What's next as Grant Amato faces a potential death sentence?
Unhuman.
It's been 12 years since a young Tennessee couple was kidnapped, tortured, and killed.
It's not pleasant. What they did to both of them.
Now a fifth person will finally be tried in the brutal slayings of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom.
Cannot imagine not coming up here and having another trial.
Eric Boyd going on trial in Knoxville for the killings.
I see them every time I shut my eyes.
Boyd has denied he was anywhere near the home where someone brought Shannon and Christopher after they were carjacked from an apartment complex in Knoxville.
Sometimes I see them when my eyes are open.
The couple was tied up, blindfolded, gagged, raped, then killed.
It hurts to see those pictures.
Boyd is the last of 5 suspects to be tried in the case. He faces 36 charges, including robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. There were more neighbors that testified today. The next neighbor I want you to hear back from is Jerome Arnold. Now, he says that he heard gunshots early in the morning on January 7th, 2007. Let's hear it.
Give the jury your name, please.
My name is Jerome Arnold.
Live here in Knoxville, Mr. Arnold?
I used to. I no longer live here. I live in the Chattanooga area now, but in 2007 I was living in Knoxville.
That's my next question. Where did you live in 2007?
I was living at 2124 Chipman Street in northeast Knoxville.
It's specifically January 2007 where you living there?
I was living there in January 2000.
And if you don't care to look to this map to your right, see if you can spot on this map where your house was.
Yes.
And they may actually have a call out there for that address.
Oh, and actually, yeah, that's it right there.
Okay, and it's got a call out at 2124 Chipman Street.
Yes.
It's kind of a black box.
Second house from the corner.
From Bora Street?
Yes.
Is that right? You return. Now, in the late evening hours of January 6th on into January 7th, or January 7th, Saturday night, during that first weekend in January? Were you home?
I was.
In the early morning hours, were you awake?
I was awake. I was watching television.
You were having to recall what you were watching.
Yes, I was watching a program called The Outer Limits.
And you recall while watching that program hearing something.
I did. I heard 3 pops in the distance off to my, I was sitting in a chair with my back to the window on Chipman, and I heard a sound, 3 pops to my left. And when it happened, I was watching a late night television program. I looked at my watch, and it was 1:45. At first I thought, well, it was a week after New Year's, maybe somebody's shooting off some leftover firecrackers or something, but it stopped with those 3 pops.
And do you remember the approximate sequence, the timing between each of those pops?
It was fairly short. It was like pop, pop, pop.
Was any delay to any extent between the shots?
None that I could tell.
And just so we're clear, I believe you told us you were watching TV, your back was to Chipman Street.
It was.
And the sound came from your left and to the rear?
Yes.
And if you don't care to, one more time, step down and look at this map.
Okay, I was sitting in the house with my back to the street. The sound came from this direction off up toward this wasteland there. It used to be a lumber company.
You don't care, I'll pick the blue marker, if you can just maybe draw a line that approximates the distance or the area from where that sound came. You say you didn't think too much of it at the time?
No, not at the time.
And then, of course, later on, contacted by law enforcement and gave an interview about what you had heard at that hour.
Yes.
And have testified in several of the trials involving this matter.
I have.
Absolutely. Cross-examination.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
I know you've testified in several different proceedings and been asked some various questions. From where you are, where your house is situated, I mean, you're aware of 2316 Chipman Street where the murders took place? I
am.
Okay. And from where your house is, you have a fairly good view of that location, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think the distance, even though they're sitting apart a little ways, they're not too far from each other. Would you agree?
They were almost exactly 1 block apart because there's no 2200 block on Chipman Street. It goes from the 2100 block, no 2200, it goes directly to 2300.
And I know that there have been previous times where there may have been people arguing or fighting or fussing in the street, and that you would be, in those circumstances, if they were in the road, you have heard that, correct?
I would have heard something like that.
Yeah. And on the night, other than the 3 pops, you didn't hear any noises, any screaming or anything like that?
I did not.
And I'm not going to ask you any questions about insulation of various houses involved. And I believe you said the direction the sounds came from, and I don't think you testified to it today with General Morton, but previous testimony, it came from the southeast over towards the train tracks. I think you've testified to that multiple times.
Northeast.
Northeast, that's what I said. The northeast, towards the trail.
Toward the train tracks.
Okay. And this was at 1:45, and you said that you were watching the outer.
I was watching television and I heard the pops, and I was already knew that it was late, so I looked at my watch when I heard the pops, and it was 1:45.
Okay, now we're going to talk about whether this should have been charged as a hate crime. My think tank is still with me, Michael Bixon, Barbara Moon, David Schnipper. I just want to go over kind of like the basic definition for our viewers of what a hate crime is. And it's a crime involving violence, usually motivated by prejudice of race, religion, sexual orientation, or something similar. And there's also an element to a hate crime, and that is the person being targeted knows that they're being targeted because of one of those reasons, whether it's like race, religion, or sexual orientation. So there has to be some kind of outward gesture that points to the hate. So are you seeing that in this case?
No. I am.
Okay, so can we start with the contrarian, Michael Bixon?
I mean, so.
Oh my God! Did you see what he did?
I'm ready.
He
Hey,
made a move.
I'm ready.
I feel like I'm bringing some like law school angst back to court TV.
Actually, he's like a black belt in karate, but if we're on the basketball court, I would take him.
Okay, all right. Well, we're gonna get Vinnie Politan to join in on that because Vinnie plays basketball. But yeah, no, serious question, and a lot of people have wondered this over the last decade.
Well, I mean, they might have been wondering it, but the question is for what reasons, right? We know that Cobbins made a statement, and it was very inflammatory, and it did include this racial prejudice in it. But we don't know whether or not that was the primary drive behind this crime, whether or not that was what really led to this happening, right?
Let me just read that statement.
Sure.
I believe this is what you're referring to, and this is from the Knox News Sentinel article that noted the following quote by Cobbins from trial testimony. We don't know specifically what trial testimony or when or whose, but we're assuming one of these defendants, their trial testimony. And this is Cobbins, the brother of Davidson, said, quote unquote, two white people, white kids, this expletive fixing to get crazy, man, you know what I mean. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so, and again, you're invoking the word white.
But on the other hand, I mean, there is nothing to say that they were targeted because they were white. Now, on the other hand, right, we know that it's a predominantly white community. We know how, and look, setting aside just how horrible and disgusting the crime is, we know how incensed the community was, right, that it was these, black people that had murdered these white people. And some of the statements that we've seen out of this are disgusting.
Like there have been statements about
ship the remains back to Africa after we lynch them and leave the bodies hanging up in the. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, oh my God. And look, not to take away from how horrible the crime is, but I think that there is definitely some racism here. The question becomes, which side is it on?
Right. Okay, so now you, Schnipper, you think this should have been charged as a hate crime, excuse me.
I do. In going back to Cobbin's statements, and I also think that George Thomas also made some sort of statement. But look, we know that they were carjacked, okay? If this was just going to be a robbery, they would have robbed them. Let's say it would have been a robbery that gone bad, and unfortunately, they would have just murdered. They didn't just murder these two young, innocent college kids. The male, Christopher Newsom, was anally raped too.
Well, and it's actually worse than that. And I mean, again, graphic content here, viewers. I think it's really important to highlight his injury because, okay, so as we said, he was doused in gasoline. He was left to burn to death.
Yes.
He did not burn, he did, sadly, he did die, but the medical examiner was still able to find blunt force trauma to the anal area, which indicates more than just an anal rape. I mean, this was a brutal.
Right.
He was terrorized.
He was tortured.
In Christian, the female, we've already gone over what happened to her. She was raped and orally, anally, and vaginally. But look, and I'm going to be very politically correct when I say this. And there's a lot of articles that I read about this. And I spoke with Barbara about this off the air, and she agrees with me. If the victims were African American, and if they were Hispanic, and if the perpetrators were white, then it is perceived that it would have been charged as a hate crime. And so, therefore, if you look at it with that sort of angle to it, why
do you say that though? You're saying it was
because the media would have been all over it too. Charge it as a hate crime. And the heinous acts of how these two were killed, I can't see anything other than it was a hate crime with the added elements of Cobbins' statements. They didn't just go to rob somebody. They went and robbed somebody torture them to such a degree that is unconscionable.
But I still am not understanding why you think if if the races were reversed, why do you think it would be a hate crime?
I would be because I think that it's more socially acceptable to charge it as a hate crime
So
if it was.
if the 4 defendants were white
Yes.
and the victims were black or Hispanic,
Yes.
you think it would be more socially acceptable? Now, my
100%.
question, do you think it's more socially acceptable today in 2019 or even in 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee?
100%.
But I think on the flip side of that, whether or not it's socially acceptable to charge the white, like for instance, in your flip scenario of that, it's still wrong because there's nothing that says that this was perpetrated because they were black or because in your flip scenario they were white. And just because they could be charged, or maybe they would be charged in today's climate if
You're
they were
100%.
white,
You're 100%
it doesn't mean
right.
that they should be either.
I'm not saying you're right, but we have people making subjective decisions whether to bring this to a
But
grand
that wouldn't
jury.
make this right if they did that.
I'm just listen. It's really not. Listen, he has a 36 count indictment. So he's
It's
got.
not gonna make much of a difference
It's not.
at this
but
point.
I'm just saying that. And look, we have different views and subjective views of it. I personally think it was a hate crime. Obviously, they didn't think it was enough to charge it as a hate crime or bring it to a grand jury as a hate crime. But I mean, there's a lot of weighing both sides to it. Where, well, if it was this or if they were this, race or whatever, and especially in Knoxville, Tennessee, I've been there a few times. It's a very sleepy southern town. There's a lot of racial divide, especially in 2007. It's better now from what I read about, but I mean, like I said before, this crime is the most shocking crime in this, maybe the state of all time.
And also, I think it is important to point out to our viewers, especially that with a hate crime, there is that subjective component because the person who is victimized has to have that perceived being targeted because of race or religion or sexual orientation. But one more question. It's a weird fact, but I'm going to say it now because we're talking about race. Daphne Sutton, who is a state's witness, she testified in the other 4 defendants' state trials. Davidson's ex-girlfriend, a white woman.
Yes.
Right. Is that how does that play into anyone's
Not
scenario?
only a white woman, but I read that I think her uncle or she
Is
has
a police officer.
Police officer. Yes.
No, but in your race scenario.
Yes. And there is.
Does it matter at all? That she's
No, of
white?
course it matters.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not. Listen, of course it matters. And there's a lot of talk too. Well, why wasn't she charged?
Right.
From what I read in my research is that Davidson and her had a falling out where she left
That's
before.
true. Right. And that's what we read too.
And then he
Exactly.
called her back, and evidence shows that she left before the incident, and she came back after the incident.
No, but I'm asking you, does this take away the hate if his girlfriend is white? Does this take away the hate? Does it add to the hate, or it's completely?
I should have taught you about this. Part of the reason why they did not do a hate crime is because all of the African American men dated white women and socialized with white friends. That's part of their reasoning why they did not levy this as a hate crime.
I think it's the horrific acts.
We're gonna leave it right there, but to be continued after this break. It's been more than 12 years since the murders of Channing Christian and Christopher Newsom. Does this help the prosecution or the defense? That's our 13th juror question. So log on to our Court TV Facebook page and vote now. The results are next.
Eric Boyd, this defendant you see here, is on trial right now for murder. Prosecutors say he actively participated in the rape, the torture, and the murder of 2 young, beautiful co-eds 12 years ago.
Had been shot in the shoulder, in the lower back, and was shot in his head. After being archived, she was put into not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 trash bags.
Part of your job as a juror is to not let anger let you. You have to make a decision based on the evidence. You know whose DNA wasn't there at any of the scenes? Eric Boyd.
And I thought the defense did really well in saying that they made a bargain with the devil. A twice convicted murderer, now they're taking his word 12 years later, but it wasn't good enough then. Why now?
It was sort of chaotic, a lot of crying and screaming. Shannon's parents immediately walked back down the stairs, and Dina screams out, "I'm going to find my child."
We hear of a body found by the railroad tracks. But at that point didn't know, wouldn't have thought it would have been Newsom at that point.
It was 4 people in the vehicle. The driver, to me, seemed to be the tallest. To me, they were all men, and from their demeanor, I thought they were black men.
And I heard a sound, 3 pops to my left. At first, I thought, well, it was a week after New Year's, maybe somebody's shooting off some leftover firecrackers or something, but it stopped with those 3 pops.
I saw a severely burned man that didn't have any clothing on. You know, after I gathered myself, because it was quite an emotional experience. Not something I'd ever witnessed before.
Just the gas can we saw.
The gas can, again, I've marked it for evidence.
From the trunk.
Yes, sir.
And that was day 1 of Tennessee versus Boyd. Okay, so the results are in from our 13 juror question, and 71% of you said the fact that it's been more than 12 years since the murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom helps the defense more. The defense. And only 29% of people said the prosecution. Completely makes sense. Okay, so think tank, we want to know now who won the day, but before we get to the suns, we have to go to the moon. Who won the day, Barbara Moon?
I think the defense, because I think that this prosecutor, and I don't like criticizing anyone else because we can all look back, but she didn't show any feelings or emotions, and if there was ever a case that needed really someone showing emotions for these horrific acts, I would think this would be the case. So, but I do think she did a good job putting those victims' friends on, because they humanized the victims, which was powerful. Because when you see the guy's friend, the young man on there crying,
sure.
and he's the big guy, and he's crying, you get emotional almost. And then the girlfriend that talks about it from years ago. So she did a good job putting them up to humanize the victims. However, the defense did a good job when they said, no matter how bad these facts are, no matter how horrific they are, they've already got the guys who did it. I thought then it turned those facts on someone else at that point.
Bixon, who won the day?
Oh, defense all day long. It should have been an easy opening for the prosecution, and she did terrible, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, it should have been emotional and